when revisiting the memories of covering this team in the 1980s, going through your old journals, going through your old sources, were there times when you were looking back and your perspective changed rather than when you were in the meat of covering the team in the locker room? Now looking back, were you able to pull out some new things from looking through your sources? And what new information did you learn from the beginning of your research and organizing your material to revisit the stories with us?
It's more a reminder. You're always learning things. You think you know everything all the time, but you're always learning things, and I try to keep up. I certainly don't know as much about today's Celtics as I did about the team when I was with them every day, and we had that kind of access. But even so the Celtic documentary that HBO has put together, which is spectacular, 9-part series on HBO. And I was watching episode 5, which I'm in a lot because it's 84, 5, 6, that's my wheelhouse. That's when I was with them. And really the golden age. Larry was MVP all 3 of those years. It was just tremendous. And 2 championships, of course. But watching episode 5, and I wrote a column off this a couple of weeks ago. Robert Parrish, who hated me. I mean, it was one of the, I couldn't crack him. It was just a thing. So that's all in the book. And no one really knew why either. I mean, but then a little thing was unearthed about that where you do learn new things. I mean, in the middle of that episode 5, the last one that was put out, Chief talks about Larry had that dust up with Julius Erving. You've all seen the picture. They're at each other's throats, and it's two iconic guys, and that was a huge thing to have Larry and Doc at each other's throats. And Doc was near the end of his career, and Larry was at the height of his career, so it wasn't really a fair skill set at that point, because in his day, Doc would have killed Larry, just the athleticism. But it was past his day at this point. Larry was at the height, so it was the other way around. And Larry was just torching his ass and really rubbing it in, saying stuff in his face, and just erupted. You had that. And in the HBO thing, Chief talks about it and says, I didn't come to his defense that day because I was mad about when my contract, I didn't like my contract the year before. He said some shit I didn't like. And then they blew up the quote, and it was from my story. And I remembered that. I came down hard on Parrish. I'm big on honoring contracts, and he was under contract. But you know how it is. It's like Brown making more than Tatum because he signed after Tatum. That the way it goes, the last guy to sign makes the most money. The same way then. So then McHale was still coming off the bench, and he had signed, and he was making more than Parrish, who was a starter. And that just set Robert off. So he did not want to honor his contract. He wanted to renegotiate because they were paying a reserve more than him. And that was his logic. And there was a preseason trip, and Chief didn't go. He just disappeared, said, that's it. And I came down hard on him. But there was a quote. I remember it was preseason games in Phoenix or something. And Larry said, yeah, well, I'm disappointed Robert feels that way, but we got a lot of good guys here, and we'll figure it out. It was very kind of uncaring and not supportive of that's how Robert took it. So lo and behold, a year later, he's still harboring this and doesn't get off the bench. And I went back and looked at my stories from 40 years ago, and sure enough, I kind of remembered that, but I even had a line where the only player who wasn't fined, it was like $500 or something, was Robert Parrish, because he did not come off the bench. I mean, both benches emptied, and Chief happened to be he was sitting out. He was taking a blow at that point, so he wasn't in the game, and he did not come off the bench. The only guy on either team, and now we know why. So there, you learn something that's new, and it was because of something I had written the year earlier. I quoted Larry. And maybe that was where Chief couldn't get past my input into what he considered disrespect of himself at that time.
What's your take on what Rick Carlisle and Cedric Maxwell said in your book, where you wrote that when you interviewed them for this book, they both said that you wanted the Celtics to lose, and that anytime something good happened to them on the road, you would slam your fists on your keyboard and drop an F-bomb.
Oh, so that
do you understand where they're
yeah, so
understand where they're coming from with that?
Yeah, they called Rick Carlisle. His nickname was Flip, so that's still, he's just Flip because his feet were unusually large for his body, even then. And he was it's like third, fourth round pick. Nobody expected anything, and he made the team, and he had a couple moments, but he got the most out of what he had. And of course, he's had this great career as a coach, won the championship and all that. So I hunted him down in the process of this, and he was just breaking balls. I mean, I kind of expected it, but he, because I was taping all these interviews, and he said, because I told him what the book title was and the whole thing. He goes, if you had any balls, you'd call this book "I Hope They Lose," because that's what we all knew you were thinking that. And then of course Max chimed in. Max would always break chops about that, chime in on that. And it was more interesting if something went wrong for them. I mean, they won 67 games, whatever it was, and sure, I mean, it got a little boring, the same old all the time. I find this year's team a little bit like that. Even the 6-game road trip where they go 6-0, it's still, I don't know. I like contested games, and a lot of them just aren't.
Right.
They're down 2 or 3 of their 8-man rotation. They still just kill people. So good for them and to do what they've done. But yeah, so I was always looking for something different, something new, and yeah, if they were to lose a couple in a row, it was mildly more interesting for me because I wasn't a fan. I'm just looking for the best story. And sometimes them losing was a better story. So that's what Flip and Max were getting at with that, and I can't dispute that. But we were not going to call the book "I Hope They Lose."
Now, Dan, in the 1980s, of course, you saw a lot of winning as you're talking about right now. But 1983 is a particularly notorious season where the Celtics underachieved, and we all hear the stories of what happened with Bill Fitch. Of course, he was eventually ousted within the Celtics organization for Casey Jones later on in time. But during that 82-83 season, was there a particular point in that year where the team gave up on Bill Fitch?
Yes, it was like a borderline mutiny. It was just, and I was first year in the beat, but I had covered the Baltimore Orioles for 5 years. I mean, I had been around Major League Baseball, and I was young, but I knew when guys were quitting on a guy, and it was weird to walk into it because Fitch was a good coach. He's what they needed, and he was Larry's rookie coach, and won a championship in '81, and he got Robert Parrish. Chief owes him a lot for turning his career around, making him run the floor because he was great at that. And Fitch identified certain skills and got the most out of guys, but it had run its course, and in that league, a lot of guys, 3-4 years, that's it. And with Fitch, the way he ran things, he just had a lot of, hard-o rules and stuff that these men did not want to. Like in Madison Square Garden, when the game ended, they had to get on the bus and go back to the hotel and then get released. They couldn't be released at Madison Square Garden. So, guys would have their families or relatives visiting Madison Square Garden and say, yeah, I'll meet you back at the hotel. I gotta ride the bus back with the team. And just stupid little stuff like that. And these guys were men. They were champions. They didn't need that. So there was just all this stuff and, video. I saw the TV video support collapse one time, and Maxwell and Chief were like doing a happy dance all around the locker room because the TV stand broke and they couldn't watch video that night. I mean, they were just – and ML, we had drinks in Chicago. It was an off day where there had been an episode at practice, and he was going to drive the bus back himself to get everybody out of the gym where they were practicing in Chicago, and he was done. And then I remember ML bringing his 6-year-old son, Michael. They played in the playoffs in Atlanta. And because it was the playoffs, Bill had a media bus. So to separate us from the players, which they never used, it was a total facade. But he didn't want us on their bus. Things were going bad, and he didn't want us around it. So he had a media bus for like 4 guys. But ML's son flew with us from Boston to Atlanta for the playoff game. And then after they got there, we all got our bags. We were directed to the media bus. And Michael, poor 6-year-old Michael, had to ride with the media. He couldn't ride with his dad. And ML had the great quote. He says, Bill Fitch, he was ahead of Donald Trump separating families. He was breaking up children from their parents right then, And but in the moment, he was pissed. And it was clear to me this had run its course. And, of course, in the second round, they got swept by the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, but that team, they won the championship the next year. They were in the finals 4 straight years after that. and won 2 championships. That team was swept in the conference semifinals by the Bucks. Same guys. No, Dennis Johnson wasn't there yet, but rest of them same guys. And for them to get swept, that was a mutiny more than ability. And Bucks had some guys, but sweep the Celtics, that had never happened. It was a disgrace. Larry never got over it. That's why the next 3 years he was MVP. He just went home and lost weight, ran all summer. They picked up Dennis Johnson, which was huge, and they fixed that right away. But part of it was Bill had to go, and even Red was done with Bill. Red would not come out and say that to us, but even in my young years, I could size that up, and I was right. And but Fitch didn't like it. He didn't like chronicling that in the moment. I understand that. It was just it was a hard time for everybody.
Do you see a difference within superstars today, or even just players today, when it comes to their relationship with the media? Were stars back in the day? I really just throw out the term stars because we're talking about, with stars, Bird, McHale, Parrish back then, but just players in general. Was it more friendly to the media from a player's perspective back in the 1980s compared to today?
Well, we certainly, again, they paid attention to what we were doing because it was the only form. There was no social media. And so they cared what was in the paper. I mean, to the point the other team noticed what we were doing. Julius Erving got mad at me over something, and he knew my name. And I'm like, this is great. Julius Erving knows my name. I thought that was pretty good. But, Pat Riley, that was in that last episode. I kept putting the hotel the Lakers were in the 84 finals, which was really a dick move, as I admit in there. Because, I mean, the Celtic fans would go over and pull fire alarms and order room service and just torture these guys. And that was because I said, they're at the Copley Marriott. Now they're at the Copley Westin. Now they're at the Park House. They went in 3 different hotels in one 7-game series because I kept putting it in there. And Riley was pissed. And he was right, But so, yeah, everybody knew what we were writing because it mattered. And it was the only way people found out stuff. The Globe had 800,000 Sunday newspapers when everybody read them. Now they got like 100,000, and nobody reads it. So I understand that. There's just so many more ways. So the superstars today, like I'm sure Tatum and Brown don't even know who I am, which is fine. But Bird and Parrish and McHale, they knew, and they knew what. Larry got in that fight with Julius, and he was mad about the way I characterized the fight because a couple of guys were holding him so he couldn't swing back, and he said, people pay attention to what you do. I care about what's in there, and don't do that. Fix that kind of thing. So it mattered, and this is just evolution. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way it evolved, and I understand it, and I understand how really kind of irrelevant we are to them now. And they never liked us, but it mattered back then.
Now that brings up a follow-up question for that when we look at the different eras out there of basketball and really just the different levels of coverage and access that media members do have. But just within the Boston sports market, we all know scrutiny is at abundance in the Boston area. So for you personally, when it came to players, coaches, executives, even the public scrutinizing a piece of yours, how did you deal with that scrutiny?
That was an easy one for me. I had really good role models, and with Bob Ryan, Will McDonough, we all go about it differently. But I knew what the job was, and I knew I wasn't going to be friends with anybody, and that was easy. They don't want to be our friend. I understand that. We're sort of an annoyance, and in the way. So I never tried to cozy up, or I understood it. If when Larry got in this barroom fight, I was just hitting a good stride with him, pretty good year or so, where he was really starting to, I think, trust me and like me a little bit. And that barroom fight happened, and I knew I'm going to get the big freeze after this. And I told my boss, I got the whole thing. If you want to have somebody else write it, Larry probably still talk to me. So no, you gathered it, you do it. So I did. And then I saw him first day of camp, and he said, "That's it for you, Scoop. I'm not talking to you all year." And he didn't until the All-Star break when I was leaving to go to baseball. That's when he won the first 3-point contest. He said, "Take that, Dan Shaughnessy. Put that in your paper." But it was so yeah. He honored that, and I understood it. I mean, the guys, some guys, that team had a lot of talkers. Maxwell, ML, DJ, Mikhail, Danny. So I could always get stuff. And you could stand in the back of the room, and if Larry's talking, I could hear it and get what I needed. But it wasn't the greatest thing to have the best player in the NBA, freeze you out for the year. So I don't know if it was worth it, but it's a true story. It happened, whatever.
When you talk about the 1984 finals, we look at the team, and it was kind of seen that the Celtics kind of were in their own heads, and it was apparent during Game 4. You had Maxwell and Carr taunting James Worthy, and after missing a free throw at the end of the game, and you also had Mikhail's infamous hard foul on Rambis. Do you think the general consensus was the Lakers were the better team, or was that the team was really just playing down to competition?
No, I mean, they were both great. There's a lot of Hall of Famers on the floor there. But the Lakers were better. The Celtics know it. Most of them admit that. And, what's better? Who measures that? But, yeah, that Laker team, they were stacked. And the Celtics, if you just look at the way the first 3 games went, the Celtics get beat at home handily. They're going to lose at home again. Henderson steals the ball, and they get that one. Then they go out there and lose by like 35. Should have been down 3-0. They won the series, and it pivoted a lot of things. So that was the greatest psych job I've ever seen for a whole team against another whole team. And it was just it's one of those things, Jerry West and Riley, they were tortured by that. Magic came back pretty nicely from that. But even Worthy was such a young player then. You can still hear it when they talk about it. That had to be horrible for them. Now they came back and won it in Boston the next year. So that was pretty good. And when they played each other again in 87, it wasn't, I don't know, Mikhail was hurt. And there was a lot of things that were unfortunate about that one. Would have been great if the Lakers were there in 86 because the Celtics were so good that year. And the Lakers got beat by Houston. But, yeah, that Boston-LA thing, like boxing had the Ali Frazier fights, that's what that was for the NBA. Absolutely put him on the map. It was coming, and then David Stern became commissioner, and he knew what to do. And that leads right up to the Dream Team and Jordan and all that stuff, the NBA. But those mid-'80s Celtic Laker things absolutely, just catapulted the league to the next level.
And to look at something a little bit more recent, when you see the NBA struggling with ratings, do you think that a Celtics-Lakers rivalry-esque type of ordeal is something that would help improve the ratings and the lower viewership of the NBA, or is there other factors that are involved in that?
Well, there's always other factors, but the big markets, that's always going to be a good thing. Boston, LA is the best matchup that the NBA can have. Is you got both coasts represented. You've got the 2 winningest franchises, 17 banners, 18 banners. The old Larry Magic thing, the Russell Chamberlain thing. Right up to Paul Pierce and Kobe, and they played him again twice in 08 and 10. So, yeah, I mean, I was getting geeked up about that, after the Luka trade. And then, LeBron, before he sort of started getting hurt, that looked like maybe that's in the offing. It looks like OK City, it's probably going to be tough to get past them, and the Lakers don't seem to be whole. But that's always a good thing for the league. I mean, there's a million other factors. But Boston, LA is still in. And if you got LeBron James against Boston one last time, yeah, give me that every time. But it's still going to be a good thing. You could get Celtics Knicks in the second round. You should get that. That's always a good thing for the league. But, Knicks, they disappoint me. They can't beat Boston. They can't beat Oak City. They're 0-8 against those 3 teams in Cleveland. And so they're a little bit, but they're 20 games over, and they haven't won one since '73. So they're due, but this is not their year either. So, yeah, anytime the big markets are good thing for the league.
Now, going back to 1984, the 84 Celtics team is widely regarded as one of the better Celtics teams of all time. Everybody loves 86, but 84 was just as special as well. But for somebody looking on the outside, we're young guys here. We don't exactly know how that time period went about. Describe what it was like covering a Celtics-Lakers finals game at the old Boston Garden in June of 1984.
Well, there was just so many great things about that. Obviously, the star power. I mean, you got Kareem, Magic, Worthy over there, and Celtics, the whole Bird Parrish McHale thing. Dennis Johnson's been introduced to it. And the fact that it was still the 2-2-1-1-1 format, which we're back to, but that went away for like 30 years because of that. And we were flying commercial, so it was just, and there weren't that many days off between games. So every day was either a game or coast to coast flight, and it was intense. And just the physicality. Obviously, we referenced the Rambus takedown by McHale. Those things, just the trash talking, the skill levels, and it was the first time Magic and Larry, they had the college thing in '79, and then they come into the league, and Larry's MVP, Magic wins a championship, then Larry wins a championship, and I should say Larry was Rookie of the Year, and Magic won a championship that first year. But and then Larry got his championship, so they were back and forth, and then finally they meet, and that was critical. And it was a full circle thing for Bird because he got to finally win one against Magic, and there's no doubt in my mind that's the most special one for him because he won twice against the Houston Rockets, which is nice. But beating Magic, yeah, that's the one. And so yeah, the back and forth. You had Jack Nicholson going back and forth with it. He was at the height of his powers at that time too, and the whole Boston LA thing. And all the TV specials have really brought that out in a good way. NBC Sports Boston did a great thing on that. ESPN did a great thing on that, and Netflix, and HBO one now. I mean, any of them, it doesn't take much to pick up the flavor of that. You had the racial component, black, white, all that stuff. I mean, it's got every little theme you want to bring out. It's there, and I enjoyed the hell out of that as a competitive, singular 2-week event. That's right there. I mean, the Red Sox Yankee thing from '04, because of the importance of 86 years and all that stuff. That's sort of the pinnacle for me. But in terms of pure enjoyment and just intensity of 7 games, that Celtic Laker thing is best thing ever.
And also that brings me to the point of Cedric Maxwell. That was his last title with the Boston Celtics before eventually leaving the team later on in time. And he was not on the '86 team. He was playing for the Clippers that season. I'm sure you know. But in terms of the 1985 season after '84, there was a lot to be said about Cedric Maxwell that year. Did Cedric Maxwell take his knee rehab seriously that season, and how did that affect the team pursuing the title and back-to-back titles in 1985?
You guys see what he's like. His radio persona is pretty close to him. He's a laid-back guy. He doesn't really take things too seriously. And I think, he obviously cared about playing, about coming back. He cared about getting paid in his free agency and how he was treated. But he would be irreverent, and he would say things for effect, just to get laughs or whatever. And Larry didn't take to that, so there was a notion that he wasn't trying hard enough to get back on the floor. And those two really that was an unfortunate split that way. And Max harbored some things. Larry'd make the all defensive team, second team, stuff like that. And Max like, hey, I'm the guy guarding Dominique Wilkins and Sidney Moncrief and all these guys. Like, why is Larry getting this? So there was always a little bit of pushback about that. They all respected how great everybody was, but stuff creeps up like that, gets to you a little bit. Excuse me. So I think that was just one where, Max, again, Game 7, '84, he was MVP of Game 7, 24 points, highest point total of the season, 7th game of the finals, and he took over. And that's the hop on my back thing and all that. So great that he did that. And then the knee gave out the next year, and he was never whole again with them, never whole anywhere, really. And Red didn't like it. And Red didn't like the commentary. Larry didn't like it. So he was in the doghouse to the point where that season at the end, when they lose Game 6 at home in the finals to the Lakers, Max didn't even get off the bench. Really, no one did. They only played like 7 guys in that game. But Quinn Buckner, Carlos Clark, Max, ML, they all stayed anchored to the bench the whole game. And that was Casey Jones, so he wasn't being grudgy. It was just they were not useful at that point. And the team that was so great during the regular season got very thin in the postseason, and they couldn't take it across.
Right, and we see today, typically in today's NBA, with all the player movement out there, typically we see players when they leave a situation, they're not so welcomed back into that situation later on in time. Are you surprised that Cedric Maxwell is as prominent of a figure in Celtics Nation as he is today?
Only because he told us we'd never see him again. So when he was playing, and he went a whole year without talking, my first year, 82, 83, he was mad about some paternity suit that got written about, which wasn't me, but he took it out on everybody and didn't talk for the year. And but after that, he was back to being a quote machine, which he to this day is. But he would always say, "You'll never see me again," and he honored that for quite a few years. Once he was done after the trade, then he finishes up, and we didn't. And then he needed a job, and he got the job. He was good at it. And Red finally yielded, and he got to be in the rafters. So all those things were nice. And now you can't shake him. He's everywhere, which is great because he's really entertaining and he's good at his job. And he's got the gravitas of having been MVP of the finals in 81 and 2 championships, all that good stuff. So, yeah, it's surprising because of the dialogue he gave us back then. You'll never see me again. And he honored that for a while, but now it's the total opposite. So it's good to have him back.
Gotta love cornbread. Gotta love cornbread.
You talk about in 85, right? Boston coming off a championship, a great one against LA. They win in 7, and they drop the ball. They lose game 6 at home. You talk about Maxwell. You talk about his knee. They felt like a retool needed to happen, and it did. And they brought in Bill Walton. And, it's prevalent in the Celtic City documentary just how big Walton was. But to you, in your perspective, what happened the following year when they added Walton that made him such a special piece for that team?
Oh, my, that was magic. I mean, Bill was only a year or two older than me, but he was just this mystical figure. Going back to his college days, he couldn't takes the throne from Kareem at UCLA and keeps this thing going 3 more years. They went like 88-1 or whatever it was. And, they're the 2 greatest college players. I guess Leitner can go in the argument, but it's just ridiculous. And then, he had that whole, the ponytail and the, vegetarian and harboring Patty Hearst from the FBI and, all these different things. He was a counterculture guy and smart. He was quiet. We didn't realize about the stutter, which was one of the things that made him quiet. And I didn't know he was such a sports fan and such a honk, reading everything and knowing everything, just his intellectual curiosity. So when they traded for him, it was great because you're bringing on this guy with all this, he was MVP of the league in 77, 78 and wins a championship in Portland. But he, could never stay healthy and stay on the floor. But when they acquired him, man, it was like, really? This is so great. And we didn't know he's going to get this parting gift of playing 80 games. He never played 80 games. And, able to be in a role where they didn't need him to play big minutes. 15 a night, give Chief a blow. That was the role. And it worked magically. And there was so much value with Larry and Bill with the passing clinics we'd see on a nightly basis. Just Larry playing point forward and Bill flashing up from the low block and nodding and Larry doing the backdoor cuts. It was just that. Watch that stuff. It's ballet. So, yeah. And just the ball breaking and the practices and McHale and Ainge. And there was a lot. But I, as a writer, he was a gift. And the first night, teams in New Jersey and they lose. And, he had like 7 turnovers in about 20 minutes. It was underwhelming debut. And we go in, the old dump at Brendan Byrne Arena at Jersey. And, they lost the opener. You got, another 80 to go here. And Bill's like, I am a disgrace to the game of basketball. And he just launched into this annihilation of his own self here. And I'm like, whoa, this is going to be good. And Larry's like, shut up and have a beer. We got 81 and more to play. So, that stuff was, and then I remember being on the road. I was in like San Francisco and he sat down with me and had breakfast. He just wanted to know about baseball and the Red Sox and Fenway and just Boston history. And he had athletes aren't like that. He lived in Cambridge. You can go back in time. I defy you to find another athlete who lived in Cambridge. I think Kareem did when he was studying one summer. He was not playing locally, obviously, but just doesn't exist. You're not going to find Manny Ramirez living in Cambridge. So it was that alone, a big house and all the four little boys, and his wife was really cool, and everything about him was super cool. And that was devastating last year. I was in Italy, and it just ruined the trip, and I had to write right away. Don't write on vacation that often, but that was important. And I just texted him a few days earlier, so that one still hurts. But yeah, he was the greatest.
Now, you talked about in your book the brilliance of Red Auerbach's moves as GM of the team. You mentioned the maneuvers he made to get Bill Russell on the Celtics. Later on, the risk to draft Bird in 78 to wait almost until right before the draft in 79 to finally sign him, as well as also getting players like ML Carr, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish on board. It's a lesser conversation in the Celtics community today where we talk about, was Brad Stevens the coach or Brad Stevens the GM better, a better fit for the Celtics or better person for the Celtics? If you had to choose, do you think Red Auerbach the coach or Red Auerbach the executive was better?
Well, I guess the executive. I mean, the coach thing, so much was dependent on your talent. He had a lot of it, but he didn't win. It's like the old Belichick thing with Brady. I mean, he didn't win without Russell, but he knew to get Russell. So that was the GM read. And he got Russell, and then he won. And it's the beginning of many moves. So if you had to choose, you take Red the GM, in my view. I mean, he was a good coach. He's a great coach. And, he won the championship the last 8 years he was on the bench. He won 9 out of 10. So, yeah, you kind of got to give him his due on that. But, yeah, it's the GM, just the thinking. And he was GM when he was coaching, so you had both jobs at once. It's the GM.
And it's teased in the next episode that they're going to be diving into the 90s era of this team.
Yeah.
Without spoiling too much on that episode, is there anything that would have made the transition for this team into the 90s smoother and made it a little easier for this team to continue on their success through?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything beyond 5, so I'm the same as everybody else here.
Wow.
So obviously you have Len Bias drops dead at the end of episode 5, and clearly we're going into the downward spiral of the dark 90s. But so Len Bias not dying, Reggie Lewis not dying, that would have helped a lot. But yeah, it's a shame that they didn't get 1 or 2 more championships. McHale, breaking his foot in '87 and playing with that. And it's just the Patino thing was a disaster, but they were, the league wants you to cycle down and come back up, and they certainly did that, because you went from 86 to 08 without a championship, and the whole region of Boston went from 86 to 02 without a championship, which is the longest drought in the history of our city. But yeah, we kind of they got back to the finals, but yeah, the 90s were just dark. ML Carr and Antoine, Rick Pitino, obviously Reggie, Len Bias, and Red. That's really where Red. It's good they ended episode 5 with the end of that season and with Bias's untimely death, because that's really when things pivoted in a bad way, including Red. He was never the same after the Bias thing. That just broke him, broke his heart, and he was never current again, I didn't think. And he was a little bit delusional about that Bias. It was a one-time thing. He was celebrating too much, and he kind of convinced himself that it wasn't what it probably was. And which is maybe not doing your homework, and there's so much more homework to be done now. It's always hard, but the league's just changed a lot, and you got to be real careful with those kinds of picks, but he was the best player, and they positioned themselves to have the best team, one of the best teams in the history of the league, and then get the best player in the draft, which is a great position to be in. But you see it all pivots at that point in a bad way.
Now, veering back to the 1980s, you've written many, many stories about Larry Bird, of course, but do you have an untold story about Larry Bird to tell us here on this program?
Oh man, I don't think so. I empty the vaults all the time. And if it were that good, it would have surfaced by now. Everything I had is pretty much in Wish It Lasted Forever, because it's not that long a book. And I emptied the vaults of everything I could think of. I'm sure if we talked long enough, something might come to mind, but I'm on the spot now and I can't do it.
And one more here. Between talking about the 80s rivals with the Celtics, we of course had the early 80s Sixers, the mid 80s Lakers, really the all 80s Lakers, and then the late 80s Pistons. Who did the Celtics hate most out of that trio?
Oh, the hatred was reserved for the Pistons, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of respect with Philly and L.A., but the Lambier thing was just a lot. Isaiah wasn't a popular guy either, and of course Rodman was nuts. So you had the Lambier that was just brought out the hatred with Larry and Chief and that sort of thing. And he had Notre Dame and his golf and his dad were rich and all the things that they hated. It was by far the Pistons, and those were great series.